Heyo, Omni Dogs and Omni Kittens. It's Omni Dog here with another episode of Crime Corner with my partner in crime, Taylor Brown. How's it going, Taylor?
I'm doing great, and I'm ready to talk about some crime comics, some movies that you should watch after reading the books that we'll review, and also some music that Jess and I listened to as we read these books.
Music. Wait,
Which
I'll be right back.
Apparently forgot. I'm guessing. So today, we're going to be reviewing two standalone stories and one ongoing series. The two standalone books are Scene of the Crime by Ed Brubaker, Hadrian's Wall by Kyle Higgins, and Bone Parish is the ongoing series by Cullen Bunn. And I'm guessing Jess got his albums and ran back.
I did, yeah. Thank you for covering for me.
Oh, you're good.
Very well done.
Oh, thank you very much. So do you want to start off with Bone Parish?
Sure.
I know you've talked about this book a decent amount on your channel so far, but we thought we'd give more of an in-depth review because I know you and Kristen talked about it for maybe 2 or 3 minutes on your show last week.
Yeah, now I have the three volumes. Bone Parish one, Bone Parish 2, and Bone Parish 3.
And that's written by Cullen Bunn, and it's actually drawn by an artist I've never heard of before. Have you?
No, I love the art though.
Yeah, Jonas Scharf. I don't know what else he's drawn. Does it have it on the back or anything on the back cover? Maybe just saying like, "Hey, he drew this book."
No.
Okay. Well, hopefully
it talks about Cullen Bunn, but doesn't talk about Jonas Scharf.
Maybe he's somewhat newer to the game then. If he is, that's impressive.
Yeah, that Bunn picked him out because Bunn can have his choice of pretty much anyone at this point, I would think.
Yeah, maybe Boom kind of picked up a newer artist, or maybe I'm putting my foot in my mouth and Jonas Scharf is more famous than I thought, but I'd never heard of him before.
Yeah, we'll find out he's like Germany's Neil Adams or something.
But I read these on Hoopla, and I'm really hoping for a oversized hardcover one day. Because I have nothing against the trades, but this would be such a good series in an oversized hardcover because it's only 12 issues. It's not very long.
Yeah, this is one my friend Kyle started me on. He sent me Bone Parish 1, and I liked it so much that I went on to get volumes 2 and 3.
Okay.
Why don't I highlight myself then so I can show some of this art? And
I'll read the summary then.
Okay.
I have the summary for us. So as Jess shows off the interiors, I'll talk a little bit about the plot. It's on the back of the book. It says a necromantic horror series about an upstart crime family trafficking in the new designer drug that's just hit the market, made from the ashes of the dead. A new drug is sweeping through the streets of New Orleans, one made from the ashes of the dead. Wars are being fought over who will control the supply, and the demand is rising. While the various criminal factions collide, users begin to experience terrifying visions of the dead coming back to life through them. Eisner-nominated author Cullen Bunn and illustrator Jonas Scharf team up for Bone Parish, a haunting blend of horror and crime that takes an unflinching look at how we connect to and disconnect from the world around us. So this is a very quick, to-the-point series. It's really entertaining. It's a mashup of crime, horror, and fantasy. The issues are very fast-paced. I think I read all 3 volumes over the course of 2 hours. It didn't take me very long. And I read them over the course of one evening because once I picked up the first book, I had to know how the whole story ended. And it didn't really take very long. So it was a really fun experience for me. And I just think it was entertaining all the way through. It had awesome action scenes. Again, the art is amazing. I think that Scharf really knows how to choreograph, gun battles and fist fights, things like that. Sometimes artists aren't that great at that. But he's able to do the character intimate moments of people talking and the action scenes. So he did a really great job in every single page on this book.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a good amount of horror in it. It takes place in New Orleans, which sort of lends itself to horror anyway, in my mind. Whenever I think of New Orleans, I don't think of Mardi Gras. I always think of big, swampy willow trees hanging over and crocodiles and just disaster. And of course,
I think of the sewer smell on Bourbon Street.
What's that?
I just think of the sewer smell on Bourbon Street.
Well, I've only been there once and I was drinking, but that was back in 1987. But
okay.
I know there's really no reason for me to go to Bourbon Street anymore.
Yeah.
So I I felt like it gave us a good taste of New Orleans,
Yeah.
and of what it's like. It didn't go into detail about New Orleans, but you could tell it was New Orleans. And the
Because
main
they rob
protagonist.
graves. Because they rob graves. All the graves are above ground.
Well, that's a good point.
Because
Yeah,
remember, in New Orleans, they can't have the graves above ground because of
right.
the flooding and things, and the bodies will come up. They have the big, I forget what they're called.
Mausoleums,
Yeah,
crypts.
mausoleums and crypts and stuff, because they make sure that these bodies aren't going to float away during the night, which makes it easier for them to steal away these bodies and cremate them and turn them into this new drug ash, which then people can snort and experience someone's memories. I don't know how Cullen Bunn even thought of that. That's such an ingenious idea.
I know. This is a picture of an ash user experiencing this dead rock guy's memories. You actually become the guy. He can, and you can live it out. You can live out his life, but you can OD on it too.
Right.
And it I it's a special process they use they don't just cremate it and scoop the ashes. There's some process that in the crime family, the young girl, she's able to, I think she mixes it with flesh or something. Ugh.
I can't remember. She had this teacher who kind of went through this process with her before he died, I believe.
Right, and I think she snorts him to get she does. She snorts the teacher's ashes and mixture to get his continued guidance.
Right.
He comes back in her visions, and you interact with the people, which is what's so amazing. You actually interact with the people and can learn things. It's like a visitation almost.
Yeah, there's different strands of ash. There's the ash that you can snort and you just experience someone's memories, but there's also the ash that you can snort and almost have like an ongoing conversation and relationship with that person. I
Yeah,
don't want to get into spoilers of how that plays out, but you even see really negative strands of ash because
yeah.
cartels and rival gangs are trying to reverse engineer ash. And
Oh,
it really happens to, that's when the horror comes into play. I remember reading one of the scenes where you see this ash and how it's destroying people. And I remember being like, oh man, this is gross and disgusting.
yeah.
It was horrifying.
Yeah, and when the cartels get involved, it turns really violent to try and take control of this local family's hold on ash. The New York mob is a little more genteel, but wants it just as badly. And you go through it's a woman whose husband died, who's in charge of the family, and her, I think, 3 sons and daughter. And there's sibling rivalry going on for control of the family business. And I think it does a good job of fleshing out the world within the family. It's very family driven around this one family that controls the ash.
And I thought it was so interesting because obviously this drug will never exist. It's obviously fantastical. It can never actually happen. But imagine if a drug like this actually did exist. People would go crazy over it. Imagine if, like, one day Mick Jagger dies and they grind up his ashes and sell them and you could snort it to experience his crazy life. Imagine how much money people would pay to experience that. I think this drug would actually sweep the nation if it was actually real.
Right. Yeah. I don't think I could withstand snorting Keith Richards' ashes. But Mick Jagger, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, I would definitely OD on Keith Richards' ashes. Just one snort and you'd be like, God.
Well, just think about how many people hate their lives and are bored with their lives and how they would really just take this drug just to experience something exciting. I think that definitely would sweep through the nation if it was actually real, even though snorting the ashes of a dead person sounds absolutely disgusting to me. And if you aren't into horror, then you probably shouldn't read this book. And if you aren't into violence, definitely steer clear of this book because it is really violent.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Cullen Bunn rightly has a reputation now as a really good horror writer.
As good as this is, Harrow County is still my favorite book by him, though. Those library editions are amazing.
I agree with that. But I still think that the imagination it took to write this book is remarkable. To come up with this and write a cohesive, interesting, fun, gripping story that keeps you guessing at certain parts, and I thought I really liked it a lot. It was definitely, I think it was on my top. I think it got honorable mentions for 2019.
I think you're right, and I think it'd be an excellent miniseries or TV show.
Yeah.
That would be an excellent like Netflix or Amazon Prime TV show, not a network television site like ABC or NBC, but Netflix, Amazon Prime, FX, HBO. I think that'd be a great miniseries. I only had one small complaint. I think sometimes the characterization of the Winters family was somewhat thin because there's only 12 issues and there's only so much room to explore these characters. So I don't think every character really got the spotlight or got to really shine sometimes. I didn't really understand all of their motivations.
Right.
So I wish we had, I think it would have been benefited from 3 or 4 more issues. I think if we had another trade, they could have expanded the world a little bit more and had some of these characters pushed into the spotlight and truly understand who they are, why they're doing this. That way we can root for them or root against them. So actually, my criticism is actually saying I want more of this book.
Yeah.
It's a good criticism.
Yeah.
I think it's 12 issues. There's not much page space. They had to be very sparing, which I get. I think another trade paperback would have been very beneficial to expand out everything and flesh out the world.
Okay.
But I can be too analytical at times. But I guess that's why Jess has me here.
Yeah, and I'm under analytical, so we try and balance each other off.
Yeah.
Because I was happy with everything in the book, the way it went, and I was just very, very satisfied with it as like a horror crime comic.
Right. And I liked it so much that if they don't solicit a hardcover for this over the next year, I'm definitely going to pick up those 3 trades. I'm just really holding out hope that Boom will do that because Boom is making a lot of hardcovers recently, I believe.
Yeah, and you better grab them while they do it because
I will.
they always go out of print.
Yes. So I definitely will pick that up. We saw what happened with, what's your favorite book of all time? It's slipping my mind. Irredeemable. That really went away really quick, and that was by Boom.
Yeah.
So if this comes on the market as a hardcover, pick it up as fast as you possibly can, or buy the 3 trades, or read them on Hoopla. That's how I read them.
Right, and I read them physically by Boom, which I will put it in the description.
So every single time on Crime Corner, I have movie recommendations for each of our books that we're reading, and I couldn't really think of any movies that have drugs that people snort and see visions of the dead. So I went with a less fantastical route, and I decided to go with 2 movies that I really enjoy. They both tie together, and it's Sicario and Sicario Day of the Soldado. Have you ever seen Sicario, Jess?
I haven't, but I've heard a lot about it.
It's so great. And these 2 films are about the failed war on drugs that has been raging in the United States and in Mexico for decades. And the first film was directed by one of my favorite directors, Denis Villeneuve, who directed Arrival, which I think you really like.
I loved it.
He directed Prisoners, Blade Runner 2049. He's an amazing director. And the first Sicario is a masterpiece. It has some amazing performances from Emily Blunt, Benicio del Toro, and Josh Brolin.
No.
So it's a great cast.
Yeah.
So essentially, Emily Blunt is an FBI agent who comes face to face with the ugliness of the violence that happens on the American-Mexico border with the cartels. And she is brought into this top secret CIA mission to take down the Sinaloan cartel. This mission is run by Josh Brolin, and he has this mysterious right-hand man played by Del Toro, and he's not even American. He's not a CIA agent. You find out who he is later on in the movie. This movie is very disturbing. It's really thrilling, and it's also visually impressive. It has one of the best living cinematographers of all time, Roger Deakins. It's a breathtaking movie to watch, and I think you would really love it, Jess.
Okay.
Very good movie. And also, there's a sequel called Sicario Day of the Soldado. And in this movie, Emily Blunt is absent from it, but Josh Brolin and Benicio del Toro step into the spotlight and lead this cast. I don't think it's as good as the first one, but it's still solid. It's definitely harsher, more violent, and darker, but it's definitely a worthwhile sequel that I think you should watch after you finish watching the first movie.
Okay.
But definitely at least watch the first movie.
Okay.
I'm giving you a lot of movie recommendations.
Yeah.
I know your focus right now is horror movies. I know.
Yeah.
For a walk in the woods at midnight. So
exactly.
I know these are towards the bottom of your list. But I have a movie that I I have a movie on my list that you need to watch as soon as possible because I don't think you've watched it. So that's one thing you'll have to move to the very top when we get to it.
Okay, good. I'm excited then.
The thing at the bottom of your list should be Berserk, but I know it can't be.
I promised to read that this month, so it may wait till January 30th. So
yeah, January 31st.
Yeah.
Read it. All right, so next we're going to talk about Hadrian's Wall by Kyle Higgins and Rod Reese. And Jess has been hyping up this book for a long time, but he kept telling me to temper my expectations because of my intense like for Matador, which is on our first episode of Crime Corner. I think I scarred Jess after that episode because I went on a 2-3 minute long tirade about how much I hated that book, and I think I just really put a scar on Jess's psyche. And every single time he recommends a book, he's like, no, don't expect too much from it. It's probably not that great, but he's really tempering my expectations about Hadrian's Wall. But the good news is that Jess has redeemed himself. I greatly enjoyed this book, and you've actually had some other solid recommendations ever since then. So you're out of the doghouse. I'm back to trusting you. Matador was just a blip on the radar. So we're good to go.
Okay. Do you want to read the description while I show artwork?
That sounds good.
Okay.
In 1985, tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union culminated with nuclear detonations in New York City and Moscow. And the decades after, the two superpowers found peace through a partnership focused on colonizing space. But now, 100 years later, a new Cold War simmers between Earth and their biggest colony on Theta. When astronaut Edward Madigan dies aboard the survey ship Hadrian's Wall, pill-popping detective Simon Moore is dispatched to investigate. But while Simon initially takes the case as a way to spite his ex-wife, Simon quickly learns that Edward's death was no accident and threatens to turn the Cold War red hot. So like Bone Parish, Hadrian's Wall is an interesting cocktail of different genres and tropes. It's like a neo-noir locked room mystery set on a spaceship on the edges of the known universe. So it's noir and science fiction just jammed together, and it is excellent. But at the core of this book, it's a character study about the main protagonist, Simon Moore, who is a ex-cop who struggles with addiction. And he struggles with addiction throughout this book. And he's in space investigating this murder, and his drug supply runs out, and seeing how that really affects him and how it really affects how he thinks and how he's able to go about his job. And I would say that this character study is more interesting than the actual mystery. Not that the mystery isn't interesting, but this story is more concerned with the why done it than who done it.
Yeah,
I would say.
I agree with that.
Which I find to be more interesting because you only really see the who done it done in so many different ways, right? There's only so many different ways to do this kind of story. The question is, how can you do it differently? How can you put a different spin on it? And I thought that Higgins did an excellent job exploring really deep and complex themes like addiction, loss, and self-destruction. Because Simon Moore is really a guy who's struggling with self-destructive tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
That he is his own worst enemy. And let me just say that Rod Reese, his art is unbelievable. And he is so good in this book, Jess. I've never heard of him before, but his art blew me away.
I really enjoyed the art. It drew me in, and the story kept me there. I really enjoyed it. There were a number of characters. One of the things about these space books is there always seem to be a number of characters on them. It's never just two men in a space capsule. There's a lot of people to keep track of in this book, but the main characters I felt like got fleshed out really well, especially as you said with the character story of the central protagonist who struggled with addiction, and I can relate to that, being in recovery myself. So I understand exactly what he's going through all the way up until the very last page. So I also felt like it was a good study on getting the motivations on getting back at his wife, who's on board the ship with her husband that he worked for. He worked for her husband, and he worked for her husband, and the husband took her away from him because he was such a drug addicted loser. And Both of them are on the both the husband and wife are on the ship when he goes to solve the mystery, which added its own extra tension to solving the crime.
He's pretty much solving the murder of the guy who ruined his life, essentially.
Yeah.
That added an extra wrinkle to the story, which I found really interesting. Of the motivations of why he's doing this, because he has mixed motivations. It's not just to spite his wife. He actually did care about this guy because they were friends for a long time.
Yeah.
I would say there's positive and negative motivations for why he's on Hadrian's Wall.
Yeah. I mean, that made him more human to me. The fact that he had mixed emotions.
And that can be something that doesn't happen a lot in comic books. Sometimes characters can be very one-dimensional, and they're not really human beings. I feel like Simon Moore is a really fully realized person who makes decisions that he doesn't really fully understand, which we all do. We all do things where, like, why did I do that? We all have different motivations for why we do what we do. And I thought Higgins did a really good job of really fleshing out this character throughout the book. Even though he does some, reprehensible things, he's still a good man at heart, and he wants to do the right thing.
Yeah. And if you liked Higgins' writing in this, you need to read Power Rangers.
I did just get Dead Hand added to my recent order on IST, so I'm really excited to read that. But
Dead Hand's unbelievable.
If you like Higgins and Rod Reese, you need to read Cal, both volumes of it. I finished that 2 weeks ago.
I have it right here to read.
Can you show it off for the group?
Sure.
The viewers, I mean. These are excellent books. I loved Hadrian's Wall, but I liked Cal more. It's an excellent story, and I'm hoping to review it on Crime Corner in a few months because it's a crime superhero story. So we'll probably include it in one of our videos about our favorite superhero crime books, unless Jess absolutely hates it, which I'm not thinking he's going to.
I doubt it will. I remember reading it in floppies for a little bit back when I was collecting floppies, and I enjoyed it. So I think it'll be fine.
All right. Hopefully Cal isn't your matador.
I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine. I guess, but Batman Damned is probably the closest I can think of a book that I didn't like as much as you didn't like Matador.
And we're usually pretty well aligned to the books that we hate and the books that we like. So that was a surprise thing for both of us.
Yeah, especially right out of the bat, the first episode.
Right. And so I actually have a complaint that me and Jess were talking about before the show started. He doesn't agree with my complaint, but it's just my subjective opinion. I didn't love the ending of this book. It wasn't a bad ending. It just didn't feel like the right ending for me. I feel like Higgins kind of left some plot threads dangling and didn't really fully commit to the mystery that was at hand. But again, I think the character arc for Simon was so satisfying. It was so well done. That made up for my critique about the ending not being perfect, not being where I wanted it to be, because his character arc ended in a very satisfying way for me. So that one critique didn't ruin the book for me or stain my opinion of it. I really look forward to reading Hadrian's Wall again to see what I think about the ending, because sometimes it helps you to already know the ending and to kind of see how it hits you on a second reread. So I'm planning on reading it again sometime this year or next year and seeing how the ending hits me. Maybe I'll like it more. It's happened to me before. I've read a book twice or I've watched a movie more than once. I've liked it more and more as I read it.
And I loved the ending. I had no problem with it. I was surprised that you didn't like it or didn't love it, I guess is more the way to say it. I felt the ending flowed well, especially the last couple pages, but I had no problem with the ending and thought it tied in well to the story, but it's subjective, as you say, and that's fine. The reader can read it and judge for themselves.
Right. So I think this book is just worth the price of admission for the art alone. Even though the story is also great and Kyle Higgins does a great job, this book's art is just phenomenal and you need to have it in your collection. If you're a fan of crime, if you're a fan of science fiction, I think you'll really greatly enjoy this book. So it has my recommendation and Jess's as well.
Yeah, totally agree.
And this and Bone Parish are both on IST. So they're both available.
Is our last book still available?
We'll get to that, but it's not available on IST, but you can find it in some other ways.
Oh, all right. So
my movie recommendation is
you're good.
You're fine. my movie recommendation is my favorite science fiction movie of all time, and that is Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, your favorite of all time?
Yes, I love this movie, and this might sound like blasphemy, and I might get some hate in the comments. I think this is a better film than Blade Runner.
Don't say it's better than Blade Runner.
It's my subjective opinion. That's all. It's my opinion. Have you seen it, Jess?
No.
Well, you can't say that then. You don't know. You haven't seen it.
No.
So I think the acting and the story is superior in this film. Even though I love Blade Runner. I love Blade Runner. It's one of my favorite movies, but I think this is just better. I think it's tighter. I think the visuals are just stunning. Again, Roger Deakins from Sicario is the cinematographer on this, and this is the first movie he won an Academy Award for after many years of being snubbed. Again, it's Denis Villeneuve, one of my favorite working directors. This movie just delivers on every single level. Acting, directing, score. It's one of my favorite scores by Hans Zimmer, and it's amazing visual effects.
I do have the score.
Have you listened to it?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't it great?
It is great.
I love it. It's so good.
Do no wrong in my book. I love everything Hans Zimmer's ever done.
And that's kind of a sneak peek of one of my music recommendations for the end.
Ah.
But Ryan Gosling is great in this movie as K, the agent. I think it's he's a Blade Runner. I think his name is just K. And Harrison Ford gives one of the best performances of his entire career. I think we can all admit over the past decade, Harrison Ford tends to sleepwalk through some of the roles that he's in. You can tell he's kind of there for a paycheck. He is not doing that in this movie. His performance is heartbreaking. And you have to watch the original Blade Runner for this movie to really make sense. So if you haven't watched Blade Runner, what are you doing with your life? Stop. Don't stop the stream. After the stream is over, go watch Blade Runner and then watch Blade Runner 2049, because this is truly a worthwhile sequel that delivers in so many different ways. I think it's one of the best looking and best scored movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And I have zero complaints about it. No complaints about the ending with this one. So, Jess, this needs to be bumped to the top of your list.
I agree. And I need to see the first Blade Runner again. I saw it a couple of times 30 years ago, so I need to see it again.
Oh, so you watched the original one with the Harrison Ford narration?
In the movie theater.
Oh, wow. So you haven't seen like the final cut where they cut all that stuff out?
I have the director's cut, but I just haven't watched it.
And that director's cut is far superior, in my opinion, because that was the original intention.
Ah, okay.
So I think it's much better. Harrison Ford didn't want to do the narration, so he kind of sucked in doing it. He kind of did it in a very bored way. And so he wasn't really excited about doing that. He thought the movie would be better without it. So he kind of dragged his feet as he was doing the narration. So it's a much better film without the narration, because it's not him holding your hand throughout the movie. And the ending is different too. The ending is much better in the director's cut.
Okay.
So I would recommend you actually watch Blade Runner first, that director's cut, before you watch 2049.
Okay.
And please don't hate me in the comments. Peace and love. It's just my subjective opinion. Blade Runner is a masterpiece. I just think this one is a masterpiece as well, and it really spoke to me more. That's my subjective opinion.
It's all right. No one's going to get mad at you.
You never know. So that is my movie recommendation for Hadrian's Wall. And you can tell there was a lot of inspiration from Blade Runner in this book, even when, like, the designs of the ship, the designs of the world. Like, look at this page from the beginning. That is ripped right out of Blade Runner, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
So this movie, this book has a lot to owe to Blade Runner the movie. So definitely watch both of those movies if you haven't already.
Yes, sir.
All right, Jess. Watch those movies before you read Berserk.
Okay, maybe I can do that. I still have to watch Joker. That's my prime. That's the prime movie I have to watch first, and then I will watch those.
I am so interested in your opinion of Joker. I want to know what you think, because for those of you who don't know, Jess is really starting to get fed up with the Joker.
I am sick of the Joker.
After how many years, 50-some years of reading the Joker and watching him, Jess has finally had his fill.
I'm a beaten man when it comes to the Joker. So the next book is actually a book that I've owned for a long time and didn't read until this week for this broadcast, and that's Ed Brubaker's Scene of the Crime.
Right.
this was the last thing of the crime stuff of Brubaker's that I hadn't read. And do you want to do the same thing while I show the art?
Yeah, this summary is going to take about 5 seconds to read, though, because it's very short. So PI Jack Harriman has seen too many dead bodies, but that's the family curse because his uncle is the most famous crime scene photographer since Ouija. Is that the way to say it? I don't know who that even is.
I think it's Ouija.
A Ouija.
I remember hearing about him.
Okay. Reeling from a case gone wrong, Jake tackles a missing persons job that should be easy, but instead leads straight into the secrets and lies of a bizarre sex cult. That's all we get on the back of the cover. So this is the book that really shot Ed Brubaker into the spotlight and got him a foot in the door at DC. And this was actually originally published with Vertigo, but as with all of his other recent books, it's now republished under Images Publishing House. So this book was penciled and partially inked by the always amazing Michael Lark, who has drawn some of my favorite books of all time, like Gotham Central and Lazarus. And I heard on a podcast that Lark wasn't very happy with his inks, and he was getting behind schedule. So Vertigo actually brought on Sean Phillips to finish the inks on this series. So this is the first collaboration of many between Brubaker and Phillips. And that accident, that just Michael Lark being frustrated, led to one of the greatest dynamic duos in comic history.
I agree with that 100%.
So Michael Lark, we love you. You're amazing, but I'm glad the inks didn't go the way you wanted to on this book because it gave us a great partnership that's lasted for years and years.
Yeah.
And I think Seeing the Crime is everything that you want out of a PI, private eye mystery. It's a central mystery with a lot of twists and turns. It has a flawed protagonist who gets the crap kicked out of him many times throughout the book and has excellent first-person narration.
Yeah, I liked him. He was very flawed. He was also an addict, so I related to him. No, he was still drinking throughout it. But he was, addiction is what I empathized with.
All three of these books had addiction in it.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't even think about that.
Crime Corner, the addiction episode.
Man, if we had known that before, we could have looked really smart. Now we look like we're uninformed. We planned it all along. We always knew that.
I'll just call it the addiction episode. Well, it's easy. I can see why private detectives dealing with what they deal with can be so easily addicted to alcohol and maybe something else to numb the pain of what if they're solving crimes like this. This was like, as you say, a run-of-the-mill case where he thought he solved it, and then it goes in so many different directions and some really I thought it was very disturbing direction, but that, you can't shy away from that. I remember reading some of the Robert Campbell books, but back in the 90s, like In La La Land We Trust, and something else with the La La Land in it. And those were some of the best crime detective stories I'd ever read, but they dealt with really hardcore, disgusting crimes, and they happen. So I don't want to say it's not. I want to make sure people know it going in that it's a disturbing crime.
Yeah.
And to just be prepared for it. That it doesn't get graphic. It doesn't show anything, but it reveals something that is just so repugnant that I was just almost taken aback that he went there. But it's not made up. I mean, for this book, but he draws his stuff from real life, except for Fatale, which he drew.
Would be killed with a demon.
Yeah, so this thing easily can and probably has happened in real life in some weird form or another, but it was so interesting and so well done that I can gloss over the fact that it was repulsive. because there were so many leads. It went so many different places, and the PI himself is relentless in tracking these things down,
Yeah.
following every lead, trying to make sure that what he feels is his failure does not go in vain.
And he keeps looking when he doesn't have to.
Yeah,
And that is the mark of a good PI novel, a good PI story to me. It's a guy or girl who can't let it go.
right.
That you ever heard of the writer Ross McDonald?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In
I've read
crime
that.
books, his central character Lou Archer says, "I hear a cry in the dark and I go see what's the matter." That's That's a PI. I have to go see what's wrong, even if no one's going to pay me. I'm still going to right this wrong that society will not deal with. And that's what PI novels really do for us. That we experience corruption in the real world. Crimes do go unsolved. Murders aren't always solved.
Right.
These things happen to people and there's no resolution to it. And so crime novels give us an opportunity to see someone step in and really try to find justice, even though it's not always the perfect ending, even though it can be just sad and disturbing at the end. And I think this book is really a meditation on how the past affects your present.
Mm-hmm.
About how the past can haunt your present right now and really change where your life is going to go in the future. Once again, like Hadrian's Wall, this book really focuses on our self-destructive habits and how they're tied into what happened to us or what was done to us by other people.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of the shocking, disturbing things happen in this book, but it's never graphic. It's never exploitive. It's done with a very human touch.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
So I would say, yeah, go in there knowing that there's going to be some disturbing stuff, but I think Ed Brubaker does it in a very humane way.
Yeah, it's not done gratuitously.
Yeah. He's not like shoving it in your face. It's just saying, hey, this happened, so let's deal with it.
Right. And it's as part of the story. And it was great. I don't think it's his greatest, but I think it's great.
It's one of his earliest books, so it's really impressive.
Yeah. I happen to have Low Life, which was like his very first thing. I got to go up and pull that out and read it because that was a story that he did. It was practically a zine. It came out in comic book form, and it's about his misdeeds as a young man. And I read that and really took a disliking to him because he was such a punk. And then I forgot all about it. And then I started reading all these Ed Brubaker stories that are so fantastic. And I'm like, wait, isn't that the guy I did in Real Life?
So you read that before you knew who Ed Brubaker really was?
Yeah, that was the first thing. I just picked that up back in the 90s, I feel.
You can't even buy those anymore, I don't think.
Oh, really?
I think they're out of print, like long out of print. I think Ed Brubaker wants them to be out of print. I think I heard him say he wants them to be out of print. And he kind of likes the idea of having a book that's really hard to track down. And had to really work for to find. So you didn't enjoy that book at all? Or
no, I did because it's slice of life stuff, and I enjoy slice of life stuff like Harvey P. Carr and stuff like that. So I enjoyed it, but I mean, he wasn't a very nice guy. So, but he also focused on the jerky things he did.
Right.
And if we've all got those moments. If we just wrote a book, I mean, I could write an encyclopedia on the jerky things I've done. I've lived twice as long as you have. So this bookcase back here would be filled with my exploits of jerkiness. So I don't want to cast aspersions on him at all. But I mean, the book is just, what a lowlife he was. And so, and he turns out to be a hardworking, as far as we know, normal everyday guy now, churning out scripts and great books and stuff. So I definitely enjoyed the book. I'm gonna have to go up and reread it because I don't think I've read it since I first read it back in '96 or whenever it was. I can't even remember when it was.
It bothers me that I don't have that in my collection because I love Brubaker.
And I'm hiding it when you visit that.
I was gonna get the Omar sticky fingers going.
Yeah, that's right.
And drop them by accident. But this is a gorgeous hardcover. I love this hardcover. It's really nice. It fits on the shelf with all your other Brubaker hardcovers. It has an introduction by Brian Michael Bendis, and it has some great back matter and an extra story, which was also very haunting. Did you read that extra story at the end?
I did. Yeah, it was haunting.
And the back matter is really interesting. It has a lot of Ed Brubaker, his scripts, him talking about how the book was made. It has some of the original covers. I really liked how they took out the issue breakdowns in this book and they had it by chapters. And it felt like I was reading like a regular PI novel.
Mm-hmm.
I love private detective novels, so it was really cool to have it divided up in that way.
Yeah.
So as we said earlier, this isn't available on IST, unfortunately, but Cheap Graphic Novels does have it for $17.49 as of January 10th. Don't get mad at me if you're watching this in 2023. I can't speak to that. I can only speak to 2020, January 10th. $17.49 plus shipping on Cheap Graphic Novels. And it's also, there's 11 available on Amazon right now. So and it says order soon, which means they're not going to get more in stock. So if you want this book, I don't want to create FOMO, but if you really want it, it looks like it's about to go out of print. So I would get it very soon. I really think if you're a fan of Brubaker, you have to have this in your collection to have it be complete.
Absolutely.
And now I need Lowlife in my collection to be complete. So I'm going to be a Lowlife and steal it from Jess when I go visit him in May.
I am putting that in a safe deposit box.
You'll forget after the stream's over anyway. I'm your memory. So
yeah, that's true. You'll come in and go, so Jess, where's the Lowlife? What book?
I'll have my wife distract you and your wife as I go and steal Lowlife out from you. So my movie recommendation for Scene of the Crime is Chinatown.
Yeah.
And Brubaker isn't very subtle in his homages to Chinatown. It's really obvious that he is really aping off a lot of that movie. Not in a bad way, not like he's stealing stuff. All the greats homage older things that have come before. But Chinatown came out in 1974, back when Jess was, what, you 14?
15.
15 years old. So I'm guessing you didn't watch this movie when it first came out.
I didn't. I had to wait for, let's see, I believe I saw it on my VCR.
Wow. Okay. And it's directed by Roman Polanski. I'm not going to get into Roman Polanski because he's also kind of a reprehensible figure.
Yeah.
But if you want to learn more about Roman Polanski, watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood because he appears in that.
Right.
Well, an actor playing him back then. But this movie is centered around Jack Nicholson, who plays a private detective named Jake Gittes, and he is hired by this woman to investigate her husband. And of course, like all other PI stories, it starts out very simply and gets much more complex and disturbing as the movie goes forward. And Nicholson is thrown into this really big conspiracy that involves murder, corruption, and a family's very dark and disturbing history. I think this movie goes to some really unexpected places and some hard to watch places as well. But I think Nicholson is phenomenal in this movie, and I love everything about this movie.
Yeah, it's a classic for a reason. It is brilliant.
Would you say it's your favorite or the best PI movie of all time? Or would you go back to the 50s and 40s for that?
I'd have to think about that. You put me on the spot. I'd have to think about other PI movies. So I'll have to think about that and get back to you.
Because you're probably more well versed in 40s and 50s cinema than I am, because that was the heyday of PI movies.
Right.
I've seen several, but not too many.
That is one of the things when the VCR first came out. That is what I focused on, was 40s and 50s classic movies that I hadn't seen yet, and so I remember watching a lot of those back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Right. So if you haven't watched it yet, I think it's really good. I'm not sure if it's on Netflix or anything, but I'm sure it'd be somewhat easy to find. I don't have it on Blu-ray, so I can't show it off for you. But I think you'd greatly enjoy it if you like Scene of the Crime.
I agree.
So let's close out the show with our music recommendations, Jess. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I listened to 2 albums while I read Scene of the Crime, and because it was just 2 albums that I listened to, Scene of the Crime, because I read Hadrian's Wall and Bunn, Parish a little bit earlier, and I should know how to pronounce this artist's name. They're from Iceland. They're famous. I can't imagine going to a concert by them, but I love listening to their music, and I think it's Sigur Rós.
Sigur Rós.
Sigurros. They are extremely famous in Iceland and Europe. They write very slow moving, almost dirge-like instrumental type music, and which I am way into. This album's called Lunar 22 and Lunar Halo. And this album is called Variations on Darkness.
And Jess will put these in the description below, so don't worry about remembering them.
Yeah, and I know somebody's going to correct my pronunciation of Sigaros, so you can go ahead, and I won't take it personally.
It'll probably be Psycho Cleveland.
Yeah, it will be Psycho Cleveland. Yeah, you can tell me exactly how to pronounce it, and I will not take it personally. But I love listening to them all the time, and those were the two albums that I listened to while reading Scene of the Crime.
All right, cool. And I've really been enjoying following Greg Rucka on Instagram because he has so many good jazz recommendations. He always posts his jazz hauls that he gets on vinyl. And so he recommended Soul Train by John Coltrane. Now, I'm sure that Jess knows who that is, even though he's not a jazz fan. I think most people know who John Coltrane is. This is his 4th album, and I greatly, greatly enjoyed it. And I'm going to keep following Greg Rucka and hopefully giving you his recommendations because I've loved all of his recommendations so far. And I spoiled my last choice, Blade Runner 2049. I think that score is in my top 10 favorite scores of any movies. It's excellent. And I listened while you're reading Hadrian's Wall and listen to Soul Train as you read something like Scene of the Crime or Bone Parish. So that's my music recommendations for each book.
Yeah, yours are a little more mainstream than mine because mine are so far off the radar. I don't even know where to recommend that you buy these albums. I had to get them from England.
Well, we go about our music listening while reading very differently. You just like to have any ambient music on in the background. I like to pair my music with what I'm reading.
Right.
So I think we just go about it in different ways, which makes this part of this show really interesting, I think.
I think so too. You're right.
So thank you so much for joining us for our 3rd episode of Crime Corner. And we're going to be back in February for our continuing segment of our favorite superhero crime books. And we have a special guest, don't we, Jess?
Oh, yeah. We have a
special guest who is much more informed and prepared than we will be.
Yeah, it'll be my first time reading the book, and it'll be his 400th time reading the book.
That's Tim. Tim from the Omnibus Collectors Group and his
Tim Burnham, the nerd in the Nook, and he's a Daredevil expert, and I haven't read Bendis's Daredevil. So am I reading the first book or both books?
You're reading Bendis and Brubaker.
No, I am not.
Yes, you are. We already talked about that.
I'm reading 4 Omni.
I could go back to our last video and show you where you said you were. Now you definitely don't have to read Berserk, Jess.
Oh my God! I thought I was just reading Bendis.
We can talk about it later. I'm pretty sure that Tim already read Brubaker though. I think he read through both of them.
He has it all memorized at this point.
But I like to think I'm well versed in Daredevil. I have a dog named Murdoch. So
yeah.
I like Daredevil a lot, but Tim has like a PhD in Daredevil. He's going to take Jess and I to school, and he sent us a picture of all his notes, and we're like, wow, he's very prepared. So he's really you're definitely going to want to watch this video because Tim has a lot of important thoughts to share about these amazing runs, which hopefully Jess will be able to read.
I'm pretty sure it's just Bendis we told Tim.
I don't know. I'll have to go back and look. So either way, we're talking about Bendis's run regardless. We'll see what happens with Brubaker's run.
I can already tell you there's no way I'm getting 4 Omnis read between now and February 28th. That ain't happening.
All right. Well, what a way to end the show, guys.
Thank you for watching. I appreciate all you viewers out there. Please give the video a like. Please subscribe. And feel free to leave comments. Taylor and I respond to all comments. And thank you to Taylor for co-hosting this edition of Crime Corner. Peace and love. Peace and love.
See you guys.